All right, guys, welcome back to Cry About It. This week, we're joined by Conor O'Brien, and I am so very excited to have him. But first, I want to remind you guys, hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, drop a comment down there if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to follow us, Apple Music, leave a rating, all that good stuff that helps all those algorithms keep the podcast going, basically. So, Conor, I'm very happy to have you with us. For those of you who don't know, Conor is in the art space, and this interview is going to be a little bit different because it's not music related, which excites me even more because the last couple of weeks we've had a theme of storytelling, and I think Conor tells stories in an even more, in another interesting way that we can dive into. So he's an actor, he's been on TV, he's been on Off-Broadway, his plays have been performed in multiple countries, and we're going to jump right into it. Conor, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so I guess let's start where it begins for all of us, right? You are also a Scranton, PA, Northeast PA native, right?
I am. I was born and raised in the hill section of Scranton, Pennsylvania. I am a product of the Scranton public school system, for better or worse. I stayed in Scranton for a few years, and then I moved to New York, although I always kept ties here. I kept doing work here, even from afar. And then I moved back full-time as a result of the pandemic, and we'll see where I end up next year.
Great. So I guess let's piggyback right off of that. As an actor and also as a New York resident at the time, the pandemic probably hit you different than it hit a lot of us here in Pennsylvania. What was that like?
It was weird, and I do have some New York experience to cite, but actually I was in, and this is really, I'm only going to drop this, and it's super humble bragging, and I'm very grateful. I was actually in Australia at the time for about 6 to 8 weeks, right before the pandemic hit. We got back on March 3rd. I was there attending the Adelaide Fringe Festival. We'll talk more about those later. But it's the second largest arts festival. It's the second largest fringe festival. It's in Australia. And we were attending conferences and meeting, and the media coverage there was so much more intense and rightfully so foreshadowing of the pandemic. So when we got back, and I came back to Scranton first because I was subleasing my apartment, they still had a week or two left on the sublease. And I knew, like, this is not, I did not know how severe it would get. God, if I knew then, what I know now, I would have put all my money in Zoom. But we knew it was going to be more severe and more intense. I mean, we came back, they were still talking about, like, oh yeah, the parade's going to happen. And I remember me and Liz and other people were like, I don't think so. We wish we were wrong, but it was like, I don't think so. So I stayed in Scranton then, even after my person left, because things were shutting down. Everything was happening so quickly. None of us knew what was going to happen. I didn't want to get stuck in New York, especially, and literally there was 1 week in March where I just watched thousands and tens of thousands of dollars of acting contracts and theater work just vanish in email. I literally had to shut off my phone one day because I knew, like, it's just going to keep coming, and it is what it is, but I don't want to see it, play by play, minute by minute. I stayed in Scranton. I was holding out hope. This would only be a few weeks, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. And then it was around May or June, I decided to pull the plug. I gave up my lease. A friend of mine took me into the city to collect the last of my things in a big trip. We did it all in one day. And I remember getting out of the van, and it was back when they were still doing the whole pots and pans and celebratory moment when the hospital shifts would change. And just when we were getting back into the van to leave, that was the last thing I heard, and then all of a sudden it was silence. It was the strangest combination of, I never heard my neighborhood quite that loud, and then I never heard my neighborhood that silent. And it was surreal, and it was sad. Obviously, I'm not the person this was happening to. I'm the least person anyone should worry about. But I do remember feeling that this was significant. And I remember there's a few moments in life when you look around and I'm going to vividly remember this, the way the air smelled, what I was wearing, how my skin felt in the air. Like, I'm going to remember this sensation vividly for the rest of my life. And I haven't been back to New York since. It's just been about a year. I miss it dearly. I've had a few opportunities to go back. I decided to wait until I was fully vaccinated, which I am. Get vaccinated, everybody. And so I'm probably going to go back this summer. When I go back for good is still up in the air, but yeah. So that's kind of a quick, not so quick nutshell of what my initial pandemic life was like.
No, and you mentioned acting contracts just poof, and I think anybody listening to this, most of our base comes from the creative field, so I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody was experiencing that. And like I feel like for me personally, St. Patrick's Day, it was just like tours, album plans, everything was just gone, right? The whole
Mm-hmm.
industry shut down on the music side.
Mm-hmm.
What has it been like then? Because you're an actor, right? You're an actor.
Mm-hmm.
You're work in theater. All of
Mm-hmm.
those were so severely affected by
It's
this.
very, yeah, it's not that much different, I think, than what a lot of our friends in the music industry are going through. Actually, the show I was touring with, I co-created. It was a show called Static, that I co-created and co-performed with a musician, Daniel Amendy of New Orleans. Please go check him out. His music is amazing. Um, he wrote this beautiful album called Light and Sound, and we were old friends going back to the days when I used to run a venue in Scranton, and I met him. That's how I met him. And he sent me the album, and this is a couple of years ago, and I fell in love with it. And I literally reached out to him like a month later and said, "This is super weird. I've written a monologue and an outline of a play based on your album. Would you want to hear it?" And he was like, "Oh my God, yes." And we collaborated. We've done the show in Scotland. We did the show very briefly in New York City and Orlando. We workshopped it here in Scranton first. It was the summer of 2018. July of 2018 was the first time we did it for an audience. Super rough. And I'd be happy to talk more about that. But basically, it's a two-person show. It's about a father-son dementia, and it's infused with his original live music. It's kind of like a concert meets a play hybrid. Not a musical, not a play, not a concert, some combination of the three. And we were set to take it to New Orleans, and then we were set to take it for an 8-week run in Manhattan, and just watching, if not a few more tours, and just watching those contracts evaporate while he is simultaneously losing out on his own independent touring music contracts, while I had some small film roles, independent little stuff, student films, evaporating. And it's been difficult. I am fortunate enough. I run a nonprofit arts organization, so I mean that was also challenging. I've been teaching online through a regional nonprofit that does artist residency programs. I've done some consulting work for the arts and culture industry. So I've been lucky that because I, from an early age, had experience in on stage and behind the scenes, shall we say, I had some work lined up. But there was a good 2 to 3 months where, I mean, I was doing nothing except for maybe some part-time work at a local nonprofit that was very kind enough to hire me. But it's been really intense. And I think the thing that's been the hardest, for everyone, besides the devastation of loss of money and life in this awful pandemic, has been there's been no end in sight. There still really isn't an end in sight, but we at least see glimmers of the return to normalcy. I mean, Broadway is saying it's coming back in September. We'll see what happens. I know the music industry is slowly returning. We've been able to do some events returning to normalcy slowly but surely. It's definitely recharged what kind of work I want to be doing, what kind of shows I want to be performing, which I feel like that could apply to any art form. I bet you there's visual artists that have completely shifted their mediums, musicians that are more interested in certain things than they were before. And I think that's just a result of having the time to think. But yeah, dude, it's been a lot.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the artist mind, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody that I've talked to, there's been like two schools of thought, and it's been like the most amazing art's going to come as a result of this. So like people have been locked up and they've had that time, a lot of them just with their own thoughts and their experiences and what kind of music and what kind of plays and what kind of TV shows and what this is going to spawn for years to come, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of that. And then there's other people that like I almost feel like it. I mean, we all went through a group traumatic experience, right, over the
Yes.
last year and a half. And I've been talking to some people that weren't able to create during that. And I've been trying to say to those people is that's okay. Like,
That's fine. That's
that's
fine.
fine. And that
Yeah.
goes across like, so like a lot of what we talk about on the podcast too is like mental health stuff. And it's kind of where it started, and we've morphed and
Yeah.
gone different ways. But I try to stress to people, especially when we're talking on here and everything, like, yeah, don't fall for the like Instagram nonsense of like, you should come out of this pandemic in the best shape of your life. You should have learned a
My
new
God.
language. You should just
That is such bullshit. Can we curse?
oh, 100%. Yeah.
Oh God, that is such bullshit. And listen, if you have like I brushed up my this is not a joke. I brushed up my Portuguese, which is a language I already was, moderately, not great, moderately conversationally okay. And so that was cool. I did get some writing done. I have gotten a lot of other projects off the ground, but I mean, I've auditioned for maybe 5 virtual shows and a couple of voiceover roles. I've only gotten one of them. I put on a couple pounds. I've gone through waves of this is great, and I'm regrouping and I'm focusing on me to absolute depression. I will say from a theater perspective, and I'm not sure from a music world what the parallel is, I think there's going to be amazing art to come out of this. I think there's going to be a lot of stupid, like, I joke about it with friends all the time. I don't want to read your one-person show about dealing with COVID
Right.
and living through the pandemic. I don't need to see the show. I lived it. I don't need to buy the merch. I don't want to read your god-awful pandemic script. I was talking with a group of friends not too long ago, and we all agree that like the things that I'm going to want to see are, besides hearing from different voices and different backgrounds, give me the next Game of Thrones. Give me the next epic fantasy. Even in the theater world, I am ready for singing and dancing and joy once again, or at least something visually spectacular, to combat the dread of this isolating experience. Show me new technology and how you integrate it. Your one-person show of a suitcase saying, I lived through COVID pandemic. Right. We all did, dude. I don't need to watch it.
Yeah, that and what Michael Bay like put out, I think it already came out. I think it flopped, but like in the middle of the pandemic, they put out like COVID 2023 or something like that.
Oh my God, I saw the trailer for that. Or there was that Anne Hathaway movie where like it's like a jewel heist during COVID. I'm sure that might be adorable, and that I am going to want to look back on this time period through the lens of good art, right. But that takes time.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in 5 years, 10 years, when someone sits down and does a reflection of this period in contrast to whatever is going to come next in our lives, mm-hmm. I'm here for that.
100%.
I don't necessarily need to. I mean, please, and I mean this sincerely, we should be journaling. We should be having these kind of conversations. I mean, this is history in the making, but I mean, no more so than anything else. I don't need it thrown back in my face through my entertainment all the time.
100%. I agree. I don't watch a lot of TV, but like mm-hmm. I'll tune in. My wife's into like all the Dick Wolf stuff, like Law and Order.
Okay.
And I find it interesting how like he has just worked it in real time into the shows, right? Like wearing masks and stuff like that. And I'm okay.
I'm okay with that because that's always been like Law and Order. That's always been its thing, right? It's always been pulling from the headlines. If there was like, a certain scandal in the media or a conversation happening nationwide, they would find a way to make like a parallel happen in their universe. I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily need to see it happen in every story, but I mean, Law and Order, right? It's about pulling from the headlines. So I get that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And music, I think is going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to get a lot of, I've been talking to a couple people as far as there's going to be traffic jams. Like when things start opening up, everybody's going to want to go on tour. I think the pandemic is bringing a lot of people like that had left like live touring and putting out music. They had 2 years. They're going to want to do it again. Like they've reinvigorated online and done that. And now they want to come out. So I think there's going to be a lot of like a log jam, traffic jam, however you want to put it, of a lot of people coming out. And I also think that the music, I think a lot of people are sitting on stuff. So I think people like recorded before this all happened. It was going to come out and there was a lot of money put behind it, or people spent a lot of time spending money and recording during it for like the first big thing to come out afterwards. And I think that there's just going to be so much all at once. Like when it's officially open, everybody's going to do it. Everybody's going to tour behind it. And I think it's going to be like information overload to an extent for a while. on the music side of things, and it's going to be a couple weird years of entertainment industry coming up.
Right.
I agree.
I agree completely.
I think it's gonna be. I think streaming is just like good. Like it's opening the doors where like stuff that would never get produced is getting put out there, which is good. But also, I think like they're also like so hungry that like stuff that never should get put out anywhere is getting put out too. So I think it's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that what interests me in a contrast of actor musician, and you're a professional actor, theaterist, and in that industry, I imagine that like telling a parent, and not now everybody's parents are different, right? So your parents could have been completely supportive, but when a kid walks in with a guitar and tells their parent, I'm going to be a rock star, I'm going to do this, there's that like, well, what's in your back pocket? What's the backup plan type of thing, right?
Right.
But you've made it work, and you're surviving doing it as a profession, which I admire.
Yes.
And if you were talking to the next Conor O'Brien, who's 15 years old in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and their dream is to be an actor, what advice can you give to them aside from like the normal, just like never give up on your dreams type of deal, right? Like some real world advice.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is advice I was given. This is advice, real famous actors will give you. And I do believe it to be true. If there's anything else, I mean, I love working in the theater. I will say that I love acting. If my long-term future, if I am lucky enough to continue in this path, if I wear more of a producer, writer hat or director, if I have an opportunity to produce for television, I mean, I'm always going to have a little secret, missing being in front of the camera. However, at the end of the day, I just love telling stories, and I want to keep being a storyteller, however anyone will pay me to and let me. But in terms of industry, if there's anything else you love just as much, and I'm not trying to say you can't do it semi-professionally, you can't go do it as a hobby, community theater, that's all great. If there's anything else you can do, go do that. And I don't say that to discourage anybody. I just say that it's so draining. I mean, like anything in the entertainment and live arts creative field, it's so time consuming. It is such a breeding ground for, quite frankly, it's a breeding ground for mental health issues. It's a absolute, it can be an absolute nightmare. But I'm willing to go through all of that because I love it so much, and I feel the benefit and the payoff is so great. If I equally loved the pharmaceutical world, or accounting, or investment stocks and finance, if I loved that world just as much as I love this world, I really feel like I would instantly go to that world and you should, because this world is so draining and hard. And not that other industries aren't hard as well, but if you love anything else just as much, it's going to be a far less cruel mistress than this world is. And that might sound, but if you determine, nope, there's nothing more I love than this, then one way or another, you'll be okay.
I thought it was interesting how you said that, maybe you'll end up directing or producing and things of that nature, which I think is awesome. And there's other lanes you could take, right? I always talk to musicians about that, because there's such a window for musicians specifically, where certain ages and certain genres, things like that, and it's kind of over.
Yeah.
But I know guys who make $100,000 a year playing in corporate cover bands.
Yeah. So, and I think it's also important to acknowledge that, not to be ageist, but I'm in my late 20s. And it's definitely, there's definitely some facets that are easier than others. For me, it really hasn't changed my opportunities or my abilities much. If anything, I think I've gotten a little better. I will say, as I'm sure anyone out there can agree, as you get older, it's just certain things you're willing to put up with less.
Right.
And it's the, I turned 30 this year. I'm perfectly happy with where I am right now. And with the pandemic, everyone's kind of in a holding pattern. But talk to me in 10 years, I'm not going to be, I have to be making more money in 10 years than I'm making now. And that's not out of greed. That's not out of like, well, I better be doing. It's just a matter of fact of like, I'm not going to have quite the, I don't want to say that. That sounds like I'm being ageist or I'm talking down to someone who's 40. I just don't, I would hope and think, knowing how I feel now at almost 30 when I was 2021, I have just as much drive and I have just as much strength. I just don't have as much patience. I
100%.
don't, I don't have the patience to like, you know, I mean, when you're an actor in New York, I mean, you better be ready to get up at 6 a.m. for an audition, stand in the line for 3 hours, especially if you don't have an agent. There are certain things I would have gone out on a limb for more, whereas now I'm probably a little more selective I'm selective of how I spend my time. And whereas where there was a student film that I loved the role and I wanted to get myself on camera and I thought it would be a great experiment and it seems like a blast, it's a 2-week shoot in the middle of nowhere for next to nothing. I just can't do it anymore. I still do things on the cheap. I still make my own sacrifices, but that level of commitment for the what is going to give, my rent is not being paid by exposure anymore. And I firmly believe that every artist has to make those decisions for themselves. I've reached a point where I don't have to, and I certainly don't want to.
Right.
Are there times like, also, by the way, I'm a firm believer in though, within reason, I'll say yes to almost anything if it pays. I've hosted private events. I've emceed at bar mitzvahs. I've done, if you name it, I've done. I was a clown at the Coliseum nightclub in downtown Scranton one night only. It was an awful experience. I've said yes to almost anything under the sun you can imagine. And I still have that drive. I just don't necessarily have the hunger anymore where I have to say yes.
I totally understand that. I have a friend who is a drummer
Mm-hmm.
and he'll, record so a lot of touring drummers, like in like the biggest bands in the world, aren't that great at recording, right? You have to play a certain way. So a big band will just like send them to his studio in the Poconos. They're like, here's the song, play the drums. He'll record the drums. It goes back. He gets a check. That's what he does, right? And then he's in a huge cover band that like plays at the White House and plays all over. And whenever I talk to him about it, I admire that a lot. And I think that a lot of musicians or people kind of like are like, well, that's, I'm compromised myself. And I always say to him, and he is on the same mindset, like you're playing he's playing the drums for a living, right?
Right.
He loves nothing more than playing the drums. He's playing the drums. Would he love to be like in his own rock band out there doing it? Yeah. But like he did that in his 20s and was signed and did all that stuff. And he's like, 35, 36 now, sleeping on somebody's couch isn't as,
Yes.
appealing
Yes.
and eating ramen in the back of a car with 5 smelly dudes.
And by the way, if you're 46 watching this and that's still who you are and you love it, more power to you.
Exactly.
Like, absolutely more power to you. I still do. I'm 29. If it wasn't for COVID, I sleep on, I don't sleep on couches that much anymore. I have slept on a couch. I would rather, and it's not, I don't want to make it seem like it's just about money. It's kind of a Venn diagram of, money, career fulfillment, and creative joy, or career advancement and creative joy. Something's kind of, it has to fit somewhere in that diagram. Ideally, all three. Sometimes it's 2 out of 3. If me and a close group of friends who I love working with, and I love the work we produce, if you tell me that we could get a residency, and this happens, in a theater in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, and we're going to be able to live together for a month and create new work and perform in front of an amazing audience who's going to love it, and I'm going to come home and only break even after all expenses, I'm only going to have an extra $1 in my bank account. If I'm able to swing that, I'll do that. Right. Because that sounds amazing and I love that. If I can't, I can't. But I would rather do that than, certain gigs that I might come home with more money in my pocket, but I just hate the experience. And that's nothing that's going to go on my resume, nothing that's going to go on a website, nothing that's going to lead to future work. Right. These are such specific little nitty-gritty examples. At the end of the day, like you said, it's just about knowing your industry, knowing what you want, and knowing what you want to do. And what's good for the goose is not always good for the gander in that case.
So I want to talk a little bit about everything that's going on regarding the Scranton Fringe Festival.
Sure.
you guys are doing some really cool stuff and some really innovative stuff, and I've been following along. I'm, for a long time we were quarantined, or I don't know, however you want to put it, down here in Harrisburg. So I wasn't really getting back up to Scranton as much. So I haven't been able to experience it, but I've been following from afar, following closely, and admiring the way that you guys have still been making things happen. I thought that the Behind Glass was incredible. How did that
Thank
kind of
you.
come about?
Yeah, so I run an organization called Scranton Fringe that I co-founded with Liz Bohan. We have a wonderful team. We are a performing arts, first and foremost, a performing arts festival, but over the years, we've really grown to be an all-type service, arts and culture nonprofit, even going beyond arts and culture in some ways. So when we couldn't, normally the Fringe Festival happens in the fall, big. In 2019, it was like 12 days, over a dozen venues, 10,000 people attended across the almost 2 weeks. Performing Arts Smorgasbord Festival. Since we couldn't have that because of COVID, it actually started off as a joke. We were like, oh, what if we just did theater inside of storefront windows? And then we all kind of sat with it. And it's that moment of quiet where, someone throws out an idea and then you just all go, that could work. That could work. And then we talked it through, and we really love, we work with a wonderful company, Silent Sound, down in Wilkes-Barre, Brad and Ann and their whole team, with the silent disco headsets. And we were like, ooh, we could incorporate that technology where you're using the headset and you're watching the show behind glass. And then it kind of grew and grew. And it's like, oh, what if you get to see everything? It's one ticket price, and we guide you along outside. So the audience is outside, so they're safe. They're wearing masks. The performers are behind glass. You're wearing headsets. Anytime we have to pivot or do anything, we always try and look at it from the perspective of like, even if this wasn't because we had to, even if this wasn't because of the pandemic and the barriers we're trying to maintain, we just want to do something cool and innovative that we would do even in a normal year, quote unquote. And Fringe Under Glass was born. We pretty much sold out in 2020. We're bringing it back in 2021, all new lineup, more outdoors, more performances. Since more and more of the community is vaccinated, we're still going to maintain our safety practices, but we can probably be a little more liberal in some ways. That'll be the end of September, beginning of October. And again, you'll pay one ticket price. We guide you from location to location in downtown Scranton. It's not even that big of a footprint. We keep it really tight. And you stay with your group of 15 or so people, and you get to fully immerse yourself in kind of like a roaming variety show of theater and music and experimental and comedy and outdoor street theater and pop-up musicians and whatever you can imagine. So it's kind of like the Fringe Festival, super condensed for one ticket price. And yeah, we were really, really happy with the results, and we're really excited to be bringing it back.
It's awesome. I didn't know the details of how you guys pulled off the sound. And I was wondering to myself, I was actually thinking that when it was announced, I was like, man, they're going to have to put speakers outside of all these places and try to mic it. And that's going to be logistically a nightmare. I love Brad and those guys.
Yeah, no, all wireless. Some of the outdoor stuff, they just use their own speakers because they were so removed from everybody else. But part of the speakers wasn't just to immerse you within it. It was also to drown out the street noise. It was to kind of ensure if you're walking by and you're keeping your distance and you want to watch what's going on, we have plenty of spectators, go right ahead. But it was also kind of a way for us to protect the performers from being bothered or distracted or, losing out on audience members who weren't, paying ticket customers. Or people, we gave a lot of tickets away for those who otherwise couldn't afford them. So it really kind of allowed us to maintain that barrier audibly, even if visually everything was on full display.
I think it's genius and it's innovative, and that's how the industry stays alive when something like this happens, right? Like,
yes,
you guys,
and the great work
scrapped it. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You guys could have very easily scrapped it last year, and nobody would have blamed you, and it would have been like, we're coming back, and understandable. A lot of creative outlets had to do that, but to think outside the box like that, I think is I want to say, first of all, kudos to the brains in that room that came up with it, but also I think it's inherently like a Scranton Northeast PA thing, right? I think we're scrappy. We put ourselves up by the bootstraps, and we figure out how to make things happen.
Yes.
And I think that's so awesome that you guys figured that out.
Thank you. And we really did. We really wanted to look back and be like, we did something, even if it wasn't the biggest thing in the world. And it really, I mean, in all reality, I mean, it on its own, I mean, I want to say, how do I say this? There's some organizations, that I think would have looked at that project and thought that was enough of its own merit. But for us, it's always, I mean, we're artists, right? I mean, so if it wasn't a little challenging, we wouldn't enjoy it as much. There's a little bit of sadomasochism within that as well. But we were so thrilled, and our sponsors loved it, and our brilliant team, solved every problem, even if it came up in the moment. And we just could not have been happier with it. I'm really happy to be talking about it early, even though it's not until the fall, but we really want to plant that seed with people. Please, 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 when you see it coming up, if you want to come attend, get your tickets soon. That was probably the only thing we had a problem with, was we had a lot of people walk. No matter how many times we conveyed to people, like, please buy your ticket in advance. Please don't wait until the last minute. We had a lot of people we had to turn away. We did our best to accommodate as much as we could, but due to COVID and just sheer, square footage of sidewalk and headsets, we had to keep it to a certain limit. But yeah, I mean, that was a good problem to have, but we never want anyone to feel left out if we can avoid it.
And you are, it's coming back this year.
It is coming back this year, the end of September. Tickets will go on sale this summer. We wish we could have brought back the full festival, but things were not quite there yet. We're getting there. We still need, keep wearing our masks, staying outdoors for the most part, get vaccinated. We theoretically, probably come September, will be in a much better place than we are now. But as you know, or as anyone out there knows, when you're putting on a big event, let alone a multi-day, multi-venue event, you need a lot of time to plan. And it just wasn't safe, and it just wasn't feasible. So one more year of this. We're going to make it a little bigger than it was the year before, and it'll kind of give us the space and time to make Fringe 2022 all that much bigger.
Yep. No, and I think that's great and admirable. And I keep telling everybody, like, I'm not going to be the last one back, but I'm not going to be the first one back either.
Right.
So, like, we went virtual last year, and right now our weekend is that we do it every year is parade day. So
oh no,
we're gonna put actually blessing in disguise, right? Because I didn't want to rush it. I loved the virtual thing last year. It was cool, but we didn't want to just do the same thing again. So we have a little bit more time to think about it. We're gonna push out till like November.
Okay.
And again, scaled down, virtual, social distancing, everything like that we can do.
You have no idea what things could be like by then.
Exactly. I mean, so that's why it gives us a little bit of time. So it was honestly, like, at first it was a bummer. Now, blessing in disguise. So we're excited to, again, work. Like, I love a challenge. Like, last year was exciting to me. I think that's how creative minds work, right?
Right.
And also, you guys were involved. So I saw the Fringe around, but I don't know the exact involvement. So if I'm coming from left field, just dismiss me here. But
sure.
With the Porch Fest.
That was ours entirely. Yeah.
Loved it.
Thank you.
Again, and I hate to like anybody listening to this, I'm sorry if you're not from Scranton, but awesome, right? Like,
thank you.
I think that just speaks so much because the city and those homes and those neighborhoods, like those porches, to me, like, that's what I think. Like, I'm from Carbondale, but like spent a lot of time in Scranton. And that I think of those porches when you're driving down those streets, and it's kind of iconic in my memory or whatever growing up of all those beautiful porches, and they're big and they're spacious, and like in Central Pennsylvania, people don't have front porches like that, right? They have back decks. Like, that's a big like, I loved that when I saw it come through, and I thought it was so cool.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy you guys did that.
Thank you. We were really I'll make no bones about it. We were shocked at we knew people would get on board. We did not think 100 locations, homes, businesses, nonprofits, empty parking lots would get on board the way they did with relatively not a ton of notice. It had to be sometime in late January, because I saw an article come across my feed from New Orleans, NPR, of they were doing, what some people were calling Mardi Gras, where they were transforming their homes and their front yards into Mardi Gras floats, since they couldn't have the full-on Mardi Gras parades. And I just love the idea. I threw it out on social media, so we can timestamp the date if we went and found it. of like, hey, wouldn't this be cool for Scranton, Pennsylvania, instead of, because by that point, no one had to tell me that the parade wasn't happening. At least in March. I am wonderful and happy to see it happening, hopefully in September. And the response was overwhelming. And then I kind of let it sit for a week or two. And then I started having conversations, and the mayor's office was really supportive. And we talked to the Parade Association, and they weren't heavily involved, but they gave us their blessing and they helped promote it. And started lining up partners and sponsors. And I mean, literally no one I talked to either didn't jump on board immediately or at least said, hey, we're really busy, but we love the idea. So we spoke with the mayor. And Scranton Porch Fest was born. We are 100% doing it next year. I think, so there's what's really, really cool with the Fringe and anything we do. We love to see when we do something and then it sort of sparks new invention and innovation with others. So there's been, from what we did with Porch Fest, Kristen Powers and the wonderful people at Scranton Made and a bunch of musicians in the Hill section of Scranton are sort of doing their own monthly Porch Hill section music series.
Cool.
A certain day a month. I want to say the third Saturday. It could escape me. We, for Porch Fest, definitely did a lot of hand-holding this year when it came to the porch floats and the visual elements and designs. The music, with few exceptions, we kind of left up to people to do their own thing. I definitely think that now that people, the visuals were such a hard thing to communicate and explain. Now that we have tons of photos and videos and proof to show people, I think that's going to be a much easier sell. So we have a feeling that we're going to give people more time and more notice. We'll be able to give them more clear Scranton examples of what we're talking about, big and small. And then we're going to be able to spend more time curating music and theater on porches in neighborhoods. So the concept is like, this evening will be the Hill section, or this day will be West Side, or this will be blah, blah, blah. And we're really, really, really excited to see that come to fruition. It'll still be March of next year. We haven't announced the exact dates, but I want to say, I'm looking at my calendar right now, it's probably going to be like the 19th-ish, for like that will be the kickoff, the 18th and 19th of March of 2022. And yeah, we're already looking for sponsors. You can go to scrantonporchfest.org or scrantonfringe.org. And yeah, we're just really excited, and I think it's going to be a really, really, really fabulous, fabulous time.
Very cool.
Thank you.
I said, I gravitated to that. I saw a documentary on what they did in New Orleans with the Mardi Gras floats at people's houses, and I thought that was so neat. And then I remember seeing that pop up, and I never even drew a correlation between the two, because I think you guys made it uniquely your own. And
yes,
I was following it on social media over those couple of weeks leading up to it. And then the day of, you and I run in similar circles. So my whole feed was full of everybody either attending or that was participating. I thought it was just really cool. And like I said, such a unique thing and a way to keep art alive during a time when it was so difficult, right? Like something that I think on the music side, I struggle with a bunch, and hence a podcast where I can try to highlight people. Because for so many years, such a big part of my life was, putting bands in front of people and creating these experiences and doing that. And it there was like a time, like maybe like October, just like November, like I was just like, I don't even know if I'm going to do it anymore. Right. I had this all pulled out from under me, and I don't know what it's going to look like when it comes back, how long it's going to take to come back. And then I was like, no, I'm just going to figure out a way to keep doing it. And this podcast was born. But I admire anybody that kept things going during this to an extent, and kept arts alive, especially
Thank you.
Such a huge way. Like you said, there was over 100 people that participated in that. Also, being from Scranton, we know that pessimism and pessimism is bred into people, right? And to get that many people on board with something is not an easy task. So I admire what you did there.
No, but thank you. We really appreciate that. We really didn't have, I think I can name one negative person that entire experience. And they weren't even negative. They were just kind of, I think they were a little bitter. I think they were a little bitter, which was sad. But literally 1 out of 999 people,
Awesome.
you know, it couldn't have been better. Yeah.
So story slams.
Yes.
You guys have those going on too. Again, every time we have somebody on here, I start talking about how I love music, but I love music that tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
And lyrics to me, and there's always been the debate of like, is the music more important or are the lyrics more important? I'm a lyrics guy, and I'm not going to try to say that they're more important or they're not more important. To me personally, I need a song that evokes emotion from me, that tells me a story or makes me feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Lyrically.
I think I can forgive weak melody easier than I could forgive bad lyrics. So yeah.
Exactly. So you guys are doing a series. I saw
Yes,
my feed that you did it under the overhang at the Hilton, right?
the Radisson.
The Radisson,
yes, that's okay. Yeah, so the Scranton Story Slam has been an event since 2012. We took it over in 2016. They're head-to-head storytelling competitions, 8 to 10 storytellers telling true first-hand stories, 5 to 8 minutes long each, typically based on a universal theme that they are given way in advance. And sometimes with a wild card thrown in from the audience that night, which we did have this past week. They are loosely inspired by the Moth Story Slams in NYC. I highly recommend look those up. It's a wonderful organization. There's lots of story slams, but they're kind of the big one. And yeah, we didn't start it. I was involved in the first one that was held, again, back at that venue I mentioned before that I used to run in 2012, and they were their own thing for several years. And then we were during the first ever Fringe Festival, they had the first ever all LGBTQ story slam, the big gay story slam. And then literally a week or two after the festival was over, Pam, who ran them, approached us and basically said, like, I want this to keep going. I want you guys to take it over. And, you know, it's kind of become too much for 1 or 2 people to handle. So yeah, we've now had it longer than it's ever been. You know, we've had it longer than we didn't have it, let's say. But we weren't able to have one since fall of 2019 because of COVID. We had a whole plan of bringing them back out to the neighborhoods and having them throughout the city in 2020 and early 2021. So this is the only one we have planned, the one we just had, which will be going up online soon. If you missed it, don't worry. And that was part of the Observe Scranton Festival, which was centered around the life and work of Jane Jacobs. I won't even go into that. Google Jane Jacobs. It's amazing. And it was great. We had it outside. It was safe. Masks were still required for the most part. We sold out. It truly was an incredible night. Glynis M. Johns at the Black Scranton Project won first prize. And it was not just, it was so wonderful to return to that kind of level of live events, even though it was outside, even though it was a little different than we normally would do it. But it was really fabulous to bring this wonderful program back to life. We would like to do one more story slam before the end of the year. We're just not sure yet. We have a good feeling, and yeah, we'll see what happens.
That's great. So what else? I mean, there's so much already, but what else? Is there anything else that you're working on that you want to make people aware of?
When is this airing?
So this will come out next, so like Tuesday.
Okay, so I'll take a beat. So if you're listening to me ramble on and Joe ask all these very nice, polite questions about Scranton Fringe, you can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can go to our website, scrantonfringe.org. On Friday, June 4th, there's a big community-wide event happening called NEPA Gives, and it's the second year that it's happening. And it features almost 200 nonprofits throughout the area. We happen to be one of them. It's a 24-hour day of giving where your money will be matched. We have the opportunity to earn more prizes. It's kind of a 24-hour major day of like giving in the community, raising awareness. We're going to be doing some live and virtual events. Not quite ready to announce them yet, but please, on Friday, June 4th, nepagives.org. Gonna make sure I said that right. Nepagives.org. Please, on Friday, June 4th, NEPAgives.org. We would love for you to support Scranton Fringe, help us keep these programs alive and growing. Or there's a million other nonprofits. If you have a cause or a passion, I guarantee you there's a nonprofit or 5 that's doing that exact work. So that's going to be an incredible night. NEPAgives.org. We're looking for sponsors. We're looking for people who want to make, matching donations. So you'll give us 500 or 1,000, and we'll promote it that you'll match up till that number for that day. Anything like that. We're open to ideas. It's probably our biggest single day of giving all year. We raised about 10,000 last year. We're trying to beat that goal this year. We really, really, really need that financial support. You can also give at any time year-round, tax-deductible, scrantonfringe.org. I mean, we've done everything from a virtual theater festival on Animal Crossing. We've done it was really, really fun. We launched a podcast ourselves in tandem with the Luzerne Medical Societies and Park Multimedia. It's called Life End. It's a storytelling podcast. Go find it wherever you listen to this. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can find Life End. We're doing so much. We launched an emergency fund last year that helped distribute over $10,000 to local artists and creative gig workers. We're still giving out money from that fund as best we can. There really is no limit to what we can do if we all work together and we have the support that we need. If you want to volunteer, hit us up. I could literally ramble on and on and on, but I want to thank you for having me on, and this has been so much fun to spread the word.
No, I love it. And so it's year 2 of NEPA Gives? Is that what?
This is the second year that NEPA Gives is happening, correct?
That's great. We so in central Pennsylvania, I think it's called Giving Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based out of Lancaster.
Gotcha.
But, it's years deep now, but they it's kind of neat. The Pennsylvania Academy of Art, or Pennsylvania Art Academy, whatever, is in Lancaster, and they have this beautiful building. They actually have a progress bar now that lights up and like goes up the building throughout the day.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's like a 24-hour give, and everybody gives, and like radio stations even get involved where you can call in and like make a donation. They'll play your favorite song, like all this stuff. And it was really neat to see that grow over like the last 10 years into this big day of giving. And I agree with nonprofits and with the arts especially is where my heart lies. So I love anybody that can give and keep this stuff alive, because there's one thing, like I'm on the music side, right? And we do what we do, but I have such a great respect also for everything that you guys do and always have.
Thank you.
And before I let you go, that's where I want to touch on where our worlds cross a little bit. And I understand every feeling you had during that time. Is for those who don't know and probably visited the venue growing up, the Vintage Theater.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know your comfort level still discussing it, but Conor ran one of the coolest venues in 2 different locations in Scranton, or 3 different locations. Okay. Oh yes, you were in the.
We were in a conference room for about 4 months.
Okay.
It was really only 2. But yeah.
Which hosted everybody from the Menzingers to
Front Bottoms,
and
Lizzo at one point.
Lizzo
before she was Lizzo, yeah.
Wow.
She was a backup singer with. I shouldn't say a backup singer. She was a singer with Caroline Smith in the Goodnight Sleeps.
Okay.
We were a coffee shop, performance, literary, visual art venue. I would definitely say that music and band shows were, 60% of 70% of what we're known for. But me and Teresa and a bunch of people ran it for about 5 or 6, a little over about 6 years. We started when I was 17, and it was really a life-changing experience. I still have so many of the contacts, and I mean, my career is still being influenced by the people that I met touring or regional that went on to tour, or, theatrical arts and visual arts and everything you can imagine. Anyone who's watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or able to comment anywhere, if you came to the Vintage, I'd love to know a favorite memory. I'd love to know what band did you see, what event really spoke to you. We closed in August of 2014, so yeah, it's been out of my life for many, many years now. and I have no regrets. It was time to move on for a new chapter. I am a little bummed. I understand. I'm a little disappointed that no one else has really, because when we were around, Cafe Metro was still a thing, and Test Pattern was only a year or two gone. And I have memories of we could sit here and go on and on and on and on. And actually, I do challenge you. I would really like to get while we still can, get a really well documented timeline and archive of the venues of Northeast Pennsylvania, because I truly believe that it speaks to such a bigger conversation. There was actually a reporter from Harrisburg, I want to say, who I was talking with last summer for Fringe Under Glass, and they had mentioned that the music scene of Northeast Pennsylvania, both who comes here and who has been created out of here, is so incredible and unique that we really should be documenting this. Proof Rocks and Eleanor Rigby's and Cafe del Sol and I already said Test Pattern and Metro, of course, and the list could go on and on and on. But yeah, I'm sorry to see, at least in the downtown Scranton area, there really hasn't been anyone who's picked up that torch. I know there's other venues in other cities and towns, and that's amazing, and I'm not trying to down credit them. Who's the one that's doing all the outdoor stuff now this summer?
Stage West.
Stage West, that's right. No, is it Carl's Hall or?
Oh, Carl Hall. Yep.
Carl Hall, yes.
Jump. Yep.
Amazing.
Cool.
There hasn't really quite been an all-ages venue in the downtown Scranton area. Right. The way Proof Rocks kind of in Cafe del Sol kind of became Test Pattern, then it kind of became us, and there was New Visions for a little while. But there really hasn't seemed to be, unless I'm wrong, which I know I'm not, there really hasn't been anything to pick up that torch. Why do you think that is?
I think so. There's a lot that goes into that, and I'm
talking about well before COVID, obviously.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that. So it's a lot. So coming from like the rock side of it, there's a lot more to it now. Where like somebody got hurt at Eleanor Rigby's at a show, nobody sued us. You know what I mean? Right. Well, one guy did, but it was his fault. But like the kids did it, and there was this community around music at that point, and I feel like a lot less people are starting bands now.
But do you think that's but
solo artists? It's easier.
Yes.
Like the new punk rock, which is kind of people's like, even if it's not punk, it's that type of music and that mentality is the entry level music for somebody to get into music, right? And
don't you think though there's a little bit to be said that they have nowhere to play, so they don't bother forming?
Oh, 100%. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of like why like there's also you got me there 100%. Yeah, well, so that's what I always said was bands needed, and this is my like famous like this is on my list of like quotes that could be attributed to Joe Caviston that he says everywhere. Bands needed somewhere to be bad.
Yes.
So a Tuesday at a venue when you can get a bunch of your friends to come see you, you need that. You need to get on stage. You need to play. You need to be able to be bad somewhere that's not just your garage.
I mean, we had bands at the Vintage that started coming when we first opened, when they were like in high school, were inspired to start their own band, progressively got better and better and better after playing with us and touring for a few years, to the point where they were then inspiring bands that started to play with us kind of towards the end. It was really like the fact that you could literally they would tell you they could like trace their lineage, to multiple events at the Vintage. Not only was really rewarding and really cool, but I was also literally in high school for a year and a half when we were running the Vintage. We started like halfway through my junior year. Yeah. So, I was able to go put up posters like on the drama club bulletin board,
right.
For shows or finding talent, or, I was booking shows in between, 8th period. In addition to, and then that's you. And the thing is, you need all of it. You need the professional touring. You need the semi-professional local guy that's gotten big elsewhere and comes back a couple times a year. You need the, eclectic, artistic, experimental. Like, you need everything to make a scene is not one thing.
100%.
And I know that's easier said than done. And kudos to Carl's Hall. And, I'm always going to have a bias for downtown Scranton, even though I'm in Manhattan. And I think it's also, I think that a downtown needs that though. Like an arts community scene needs that. And I hope
I agree.
that we can fill that void. And I hope that, if it wasn't for COVID, we had talked about doing maybe, Fringe is a home for music. We kind of get grouped into theater a lot, but, we do have theater and music and comedy. We had talked about doing another all ages series, maybe getting a couple bigger names to come in, like one of the, the fourth floor of the cultural center and stuff, but COVID just completely put an end to that plan and concept. Maybe next year, maybe even just once or twice. I think that, I don't necessarily think, the Vintage is wonderful and I hope someone picks up that torch. In hindsight, I don't necessarily know if you need something that's like 6 days a week.
Right.
But if someone has that energy and wants to make that happen, more power to you.
Yeah, I think that, so there's a bunch of models out there, like Music Nerding Out, that shows like what a healthy music scene needs, and it needs an all-age venue.
Yes.
To develop bands that then become the next bands, and it needs a mid-level, and it needs a Montage Mountain within 10 miles, and like there's all these things that are needed, or different parts start to suffer, right? Like when I had Rigby's and you had the Vintage and Cafe Metro was still open, and for a little bit Backstage was still hanging on in there.
Right. Yeah.
And the Dome was doing shows in the Valley, and like,
oh my God, the Dome. Okay.
There were so many local bands, right? Like,
right.
And I mean, MySpace contributed to that, and that was just a time. But like, kids weren't playing sports; they were joining bands, which was to me like the coolest thing ever.
Yes.
But, like, I would like announce a show, and like 30 bands would email me and want to open it, right? Like for a national. I announce big nationals now, and maybe you get 4 or 5 bands that exist that are in that genre. And I'm talking I would announce like a metal like a certain Norwegian death metal, and I'd get 30 emails from Norwegian death metal bands, like there were just so many bands. And like Carl Hall's doing awesome stuff, and AJ always says like it's the 15 miles between Wilkes-Barre and Scranton are the longest 15 miles.
And it shouldn't be, right? And I fully acknowledge it shouldn't be.
But no, I agree. I think it comes, but it also, like, I mean, the lifespan of an all age venue is like 5 to 6 years. Like that's just a natural way that it works. For like with like a all age venue that doesn't have a liquor license and is going to exist as an all age venue, and that's just because it's a burnout running it.
Yeah.
I mean, Metro was around a little bit longer, but like those guys got burnt out. I mean, before them,
if someone would come along, the problem also is, and this is something we don't talk about a lot, but at Fringe we acknowledge it. Arts are a really great tool to show the potential of a space. Arts and culture and music and live events are people want that in their downtown until someone wants to come in and turn it into, a retail store, which is, again, wonderful. And they're going to pay triple the rent that you're paying.
Yeah.
And and again, there is a lifespan of that. What I think really needs to happen for an all-age venue to really succeed, you need a nonprofit. And I hate to say that, and we were kind of a loose structure of the Vintage, but having more experience in our belt, you need a nonprofit organization, not a big one, but one that's really going to shepherd it at the ground level. And ideally, one that's going to own the building that it's in.
Yeah.
One that doesn't have a high overhead then. One that can take a hit week to week, month to month. Whereas, as you well know, for the Vintage, towards the end, and I welcome this conversation and debate. Towards the end, we started, we were just burnt out, like you said. It was a little late for us. We started instituting an overhead policy where the first X had to go to the venue, and then it went to the artist, and we split it. And 90% of the time, it worked out great. And it actually created a system where artists were still getting paid fairly. When they were, we were able to pay everyone all the time, mostly everyone all the time. We had quite a few benefits. But we were able to start paying our bills more consistently. And I really wish, in my opinion, we had taken that approach sooner. Because I think that we were a great resource for a long time for people, but at an immense cost, to our own finances. And let me be clear, I'm talking about like paying our rent 1, 2, 3 months late and then paying it in one big lump sum. And again, I mean, people would be shocked. Downtown Scranton rent is not cheap. Yeah. It was not cheap then, and it's only gotten more expensive for the most part.
100%. And that's there's a couple things there, obviously, is like you said, I think everybody gets into it originally. Like if you're in the mindset that you're going to start an art space like that, you're getting into it. It doesn't come from a purely business standpoint at that point, right? You
Correct.
learn it on the way. And then once you learn it, the expectations of other people and things and everything gets muddied, and it all becomes a headache. And like we both said, burnout is and that's across the board. Like if you're a tour manager, if you're on tour, if you're burnout in that in all of these spaces is so big. And also, like you said, I think that everybody wants an art space and they love the idea of it until it's a burden on them personally, right? Like, be it, they can get higher rent for it, or the drive-in movie theater who's had movies for the last 50 years has a couple rock bands, and somebody's
annoying. Yes,
sitting in their hot tub hears a sound check and to have it shut down, right? So
I know.
Yeah, I think there needs to be something, but
there has to be a balance. But you know what though? I mean, we've done so much even from a distance this year of the pandemic. I do hope it re-sparks a passion and an appreciation for the arts, and not just because of what the arts do and because of mental well-being, but the hard, cold economic impact the arts and culture and event industry has. And I'm already seeing it. I mean, I'm already seeing a sudden generosity from certain entities that I didn't see before. And an appreciation and a value of yes, we need help and we appreciate it, but we do bring this huge value to the table. But having conversations like this and, things that your podcasts do and the work that we do and just keeping the conversation going, I don't know where we're going to end up, but it's only going to get better.
Agreed. And I think that's another thing that needs to be stressed as much as possible to, if anybody listening to this owns a business or is a curmudgeon of having live entertainment anywhere, these events, the Fringe, the Electric City Music Conference, concerts that would have done amazing things in Dixon City. Dixon City is a very small place. If you're bringing in 1,000 people to come to a concert that night, the economic impact of they're going to get a hotel across the street.
They're staying at your hotel. They're eating at your restaurants. And if they're not, then reach out and find out how you can be better capitalizing on that.
They're buying gas on the way in and out.
Yes.
They're buying snacks. They're eating dinner. All of that.
Yeah.
Money going back into those communities. And I think that's a short-term view of things that people don't necessarily think of. But I know for a fact when Rigby's left that strip there, I would go back and restaurants, gas stations, people that were on there where we would bring in 500 people a weekend. They felt it and they would tell me man, we wish you were still here because our Saturday night sales lost 20% or whatever. So that's what I think that if you're a business owner, if you're interested in business, maybe you don't care about art, you think about that. You can hear a little bit of guitar music on a Saturday night until 10 o'clock, but all of those businesses and your taxes and everything are benefiting from it. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you for being here. And I tell everybody at the end, if there's ever anything that you have in the future coming up, please come back.
I will be back without question.
Absolutely. And if you guys are still listening, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment. Like Conor said, let's hear what your favorite memory of the Vintage Theater was down in the comment section below. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, wherever, you can leave comments. Spotify, give us a follow, give us a like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Conor, thank you again.
Thank you, Joe.
Everybody listening, thank you. We'll see you in the next episode.